The monitor flatlined with a piercing shriek. In a crowded hospital waiting room, a pregnant stranger was dying on the floor. I wasn't a doctor or a nurse. I was just there for a routine scan, but I knew CPR. That decision, those 5 minutes of frantic pressure on a stranger's chest, saved 2 lives. And it changed mine forever. Because the very next day, 3 black SUVs pulled up silently outside my home. My name is Dr. Anya Sharma, though I hadn't used that title in years. I left emergency medicine after my own loss, trading the hospital for a quiet life as a medical transcriptionist. I helped that stranger because it was reflex, not courage. I never asked for a reward, never expected to see her again. But the man who stepped out of that middle SUV knew my name. He knew my old hospital. And he knew the one thing I thought was buried forever, the details of the patient I couldn't save. His name was Mr. Kaido, and he didn't extend a hand. He stood on my cracked driveway like it offended him. "Dr. Sharma, your actions yesterday were observed. The woman you assisted is Alara Vance." He let the name hang in the cold air between us. I'd never heard it, but the way his men shifted their weight told me I should have. "She is the wife of a principal in our organization. You have created a debt." A debt. The word was ice in my veins. It wasn't a thank you. It was a ledger entry. I managed to find my voice. I didn't do it for payment. I just reacted. "Precisely," he said, his dark eyes missing nothing. The faded paint on my door, the single worn-out sneaker on the step, the life of quiet scarcity I'd built. "That is what makes it valuable. Instinct over calculation. A rare commodity. The principal wishes to acknowledge this. You will come with us." It wasn't a question. The back door of the middle SUV opened silently. One of the men, younger with a sharp gaze, gestured for me to enter. My mind screamed to run, to slam the door, to call for help nobody would give. But the memory of that flatlining monitor, of the woman's blue-tinged lips under my palms, was still too raw. What if this was about her health? What if something had gone wrong after? The guilt that had driven me from medicine rose like a tide. I got in the car. The interior smelled of clean leather and a faint, crisp citrus. There were no handles on the inside of my door. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, leaving my neighborhood behind, then the city itself, winding into the forested hills where the houses were set back behind stone walls and iron gates. We stopped at one that looked more like a modern fortress, all concrete and glass, shielded by mature pines. The gate recognized the SUV and slid open without a sound. Alara Vance was waiting in a sun-filled solarium, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, color back in her cheeks. She looked younger than I'd realized in the chaos of the waiting room, maybe mid-30s, with intelligent eyes that held none of the panic I'd seen the day before. A subtle monitor band was still around her wrist. "Dr. Sharma," she said, her voice warm. "Please sit. I apologize for the dramatic retrieval. My husband's people can be intense." "Your husband," I echoed, sitting stiffly on the edge of a sleek chair. "Lucas Vance." She watched for recognition again. I had none. She smiled faintly. "He prefers a low profile. He runs a private equity firm. Some of his investments are in medical technology. That's how he knew of your work, your former work." A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning crept over me. He knew about my patient, the one who died. Alara's expression softened with a genuine empathy that disarmed me. The 3-year-old with the undiagnosed heart defect, Oliver Michaels. You fought for him for 47 minutes in the ER, even after the senior attending called it. The hospital review board cited your emotional overinvolvement as a contributing factor in your resignation. They had a file on me, a detailed one. This wasn't gratitude, this was an audit. "Why dig that up?" I asked, my voice tight. "Because Lucas values precision," a new voice said from the doorway. A man entered, tall, with silver at his temples and the calm, assured presence of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Lucas Vance. He didn't look like a mobster. He looked like a Forbes cover, but the quiet power radiating from him was just as terrifying. "We vet everything that comes near my family, doctor, especially when it involves a moment of vulnerability. Your record is compelling. A brilliant diagnostician brought down by a single tragedy, not by incompetence, but by too much heart. It's called malpractice, I said bluntly, the old wound throbbing. It's called a systemic failure that you took the blame for, Lucas countered, pouring himself a glass of water from a crystal carafe. The defect was a rare mutation missed by 3 prior scans. Your persistence gave the family 47 more minutes with their son. Time to say goodbye. I've read the family's statement to the board. They didn't blame you. The hospital needed a fall guy. He knew everything, the intimate, painful details I tried to bury. Why are you telling me this? Because Alara and our son are alive because of you. The ambulance was 9 minutes out. She would not have survived. He set his glass down with a soft click. That creates an obligation. I settle my obligations. I don't want your money, I said immediately, the words feeling naive even as I said them. Lucas almost smiled. I'm not offering money. I'm offering you a job. Your transcription work pays $38,000 a year. You live in a building with a broken intercom and a landlord who ignores maintenance requests. You are wasting your skill. The humiliation of my financial struggles, laid bare so clinically, burned my face. What job? A private physician, for my family, primarily for Alara during the remainder of her high-risk pregnancy and for our newborn afterward. On-site residential. Salary is $250,000 plus benefits, a 3-year contract. The number hung in the air, absurd, life-changing. It was a trap dressed as a lifeline. I looked at Alara, who gave me a hopeful, encouraging nod. This was the offer, but the unspoken terms were clear in Lucas Vance's steady gaze. This was how the debt was settled, by bringing me into the fold, by owning my skills and, by extension, a piece of my loyalty. I need to think, I stammered. Of course, Lucas said, too easily. Take 24 hours. Mr. Kaito will drive you home. Consider the environment you'd be leaving, and consider the environment you'd be entering. He gestured to the serene, protected solarium, the unseen security, the world of absolute control. You saved a life, doctor. This is your chance to save your own. The drive back was a blur. Mr. Kaito handed me a sealed folder before I got out at my apartment. Your current lease, marked for termination, preliminary contract, background waiver. Inside was also a photo of my elderly landlord, taken recently, leaving a known dive bar, a not-so-subtle hint that they could handle any complications. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the numbers and the threats dancing together. $250,000, a clean break from the past. But at what cost? Who was Lucas Vance, really? A private equity titan with a security detail that behaved like special forces. What did he invest in? At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text containing a single link to a local news article from 2 days prior. The headline, Fatal Warehouse Fire Deemed Accidental. The article was bland, but the photo showed the smoldering remains of a building. And in the background, mostly cropped out, was a black SUV with tinted windows. Below the link, a new message appeared. The previous family physician asked too many questions. He was unfortunately careless. We prefer someone with discretion. Do you understand the offer now, Dr. Sharma? Your decision by noon. My blood turned to slush. The cliffhanger wasn't about a choice anymore. It was a countdown. And the man I just refused was showing me exactly what happened to people who said no. I said yes. What choice did I have? By 10 a.m., Mr. Kaito was back with a notary. By noon, my apartment was being packed by efficient, silent movers. By dusk, I was standing in the guest wing of the Vance estate, my new home. The contract was signed. The debt was being settled. But the first rule of my new employment became clear before I even unpacked. I was not just their doctor. I was a component in their security system, and components are not allowed to malfunction. My quarters were beautiful, a self-contained suite with a small medical bay adjoining it. Everything was new, top of the line. It was also a gilded cage. The windows didn't open. The door to the main hall required a keycard I didn't have to exit. A discreet camera lens glinted in the ceiling corner. My phone and laptop were gone, replaced with a secure, monitored tablet that only connected to an internal network and a handful of pre-approved sites. Mr. Kaito delivered the new rules with a clipboard. You have access to the family wing, the gardens within the inner wall, and the medical suite. All other areas are restricted. Your communications are logged. Your biometrics are registered at all checkpoints, for your safety and theirs. The message was clear. I was now both a protected asset and a potential risk to be contained. My first official duty was a prenatal checkup with Alara the next morning. She was in a private sunroom, her demeanor warmer than her husband's but shadowed by a constant, low-grade anxiety. As I performed the exam, the baby's heartbeat strong and healthy, she finally spoke about the waiting room. I thought I was just lightheaded. Then the world tipped. I remember the ceiling tiles, the smell of antiseptic, and then your face. You didn't look panicked. You looked focused. It was the only thing that kept me from screaming. I finished the exam, helping her sit up. It's a normal physiological response. Your body knew it was in trouble. Lucas says you left medicine because you cared too much, she said softly, not meeting my eye. He sees that as a strategic weakness, but I think it's why you're here. This place, it runs on cold calculus. A beating heart is a vulnerability, a variable. He spent years eliminating variables. She finally looked at me, her gaze earnest. Just be careful, Anya. The last doctor, Peter, he was kind too. He started asking about supply invoices, about where some of the specialized equipment was really going. He became a variable. A chill settled in the room despite the sun. The warehouse fire, I whispered. Alara just looked out the window, her silence confirmation enough. The kindness was a warning. I was here to fill a role, not to ask questions. My medical expertise was welcome. My curiosity would be fatal. The weeks settled into a surreal routine. Mornings with Alara, afternoons reviewing logs, ordering supplies through a cryptic internal portal where everything was approved instantly. Evenings often dining with the family, where Lucas would engage me in conversations that felt like interrogations disguised as small talk. He was assessing my loyalty, my gullibility, my breaking point. I played the part of the grateful, focused physician. I buried the part of me that screamed at the surveillance, at the armed guards at every interior door, at the way Mr. Kaito's eyes tracked my every move. The first crack in the facade came from an unexpected source, the estate's infrastructure. During a minor power fluctuation one stormy night, the backup generators kicked in, and for about 90 seconds, the sophisticated electronic lock on the door to the restricted West Wing, marked ARCHIVES and Logistics, defaulted to its mechanical override. A simple, old-fashioned keyhole was revealed behind a retractable panel. And I, on my way back from checking on a sleepy Alara, happened to be standing right there. I didn't go in, not that night. The risk was astronomical, but I had seen it. A way through Lucas Vance's digital fortress. The knowledge sat in my gut like a live wire. The pivot point, the moment that reframed everything, came 3 weeks later. Alara went into early labor. It was a tense but controlled situation. The private medical suite became an operating room. I assisted the flown-in specialist, a world-renowned obstetrician who asked no questions and offered no names. A healthy baby boy was delivered via emergency C-section. Mother and child were stable. In the adrenaline-drained quiet after the drama, while the specialist conferred with Lucas, I was tasked with organizing the post-op bio-waste for incineration. Among the standard packaging was one sealed, unmarked silver canister, heavier than the rest, delivered by the anesthesiologist. It wasn't on my manifest. Protocol was to scan everything. The scanner linked to the log. Asking would draw attention. My fingers hesitated over the label printer. Then, using my body to block the room's camera, I quickly palmed a small, disposable temperature logger from the supply drawer and slipped it into my pocket instead of affixing it to the canister. If this thing was logged incorrectly, I wanted a record. a tiny act of rebellion. The canister was taken away by a security detail, not the usual sanitation staff. I thought that was the end of it until 2 days later. I was in the garden with Alara and the newborn, whom they named Leo. Mr. Kaito approached, his expression granite. Dr. Sharma, a discrepancy in the surgical waste log. The thermal tracker for Unit 7 was not activated. Explain the omission. My heart stopped. They tracked the trackers. Of course they did. I forced calm into my voice. An oversight in the rush. I used a manual log sheet as backup. It's in the suite. It was a bluff. There was no sheet. He stared at me for a beat too long. Retrieve it now. I walked back to the medical wing, my mind racing. I was going to have to forge a document under their noses. As I entered the suite, the system tablet on the desk chimed with an automated alert. Biometric scan confirmed. ACCSSING restricted supply inventory. I froze. I hadn't touched it. Then I saw it, the small, greasy smudge of my thumbprint on the scanner. I must have leaned on it when I pocketed the temperature logger days ago. The system had lain dormant, waiting for verification, and my print had just provided it. On the screen was not a standard medical inventory. It was a list. Item codes, quantities, destinations. Cortical stimulation arrays, shipment 12, destination, Meridian Bay. Neural interface prototypes, lot 8, client Chronos. The dates went back years, and besides several entries flagged in red was a familiar name, Dr. Peter R. Ellison, the previous physician. His authorization code was used to order materials that had nothing to do with prenatal care or pediatrics. They were high-end, experimental neurotech components. The last order under his code was dated the day before the warehouse fire. The door hissed open behind me. I swiped the tablet to a benign vitals chart just as Mr. Kaito entered. "The log sheet," he said, hand outstretched. My medical bag was on the counter. I turned, fumbling inside, my back to him. With one hand, I scrubbed the tablet's scanner clean with my sleeve. With the other, I grabbed a random notepad. I turned, presenting it. Here, it was clipped behind the main logbook. He took it, his eyes scanning the blank pages. He knew. He had to know. But without proof, without a broken camera feed, it was my word against the system's integrity. And in this house, the system was God. "See that it doesn't happen again," he said flatly and left. I was shaking. I had just seen the truth. Lucas Vance wasn't just in private equity. He was trafficking in black market medical technology, using his wife's pregnancy and his former doctor's credentials as cover. And Peter Ellison hadn't just asked inconvenient questions. He discovered the pipeline. I was now the new credential, the new face on the invoices. My oversight with the waste canister wasn't about protocol. They were moving something in that container they didn't want tracked. And I had almost exposed it. That night, for the first time, I tried the keyhole in the West Wing door. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely insert the hairpin I'd fashioned. The lock was complex. It wouldn't budge. As I gave up, crouched in the dark hallway, a soft chime came from the air vent above me. Then a voice, filtered and robotic, speaking on what must have been a secured intercom channel I wasn't meant to hear. "Asset transport is compromised. The Ellison contingency failed. The new physician is exhibiting non-compliant curiosity, awaiting instruction on protocol Chimera." There was a static-filled pause. Then Lucas Vance's voice, cold and clear, replied, "Understood. Proceed with vetting phase 2. If she becomes a variable, activate the sanitization protocol. We'll need a new medical authority by the end of the quarter." The line went dead. I stayed frozen in the dark, the words sanitization protocol echoing in the silence. Peter Ellison had been a contingency that failed. I was now being vetted, and if I failed, I would be sanitized. The debt I thought I was repaying was actually a probationary sentence, and my time was running out. In the days that followed, every routine became a test. Every smile from Alara felt monitored. Every medical order I placed was cross-checked within minutes by a system I now knew was a front. I was a lab rat in a maze, and the scientists were deciding if I was worth keeping. My only advantage was that they didn't know I'd heard their verdict. I had to play the perfect, compliant doctor. But to survive, I needed to understand what Protocol Chimera was. And that meant getting into the West Wing. The keyhole was a dead end. The lock was a custom-built monstrosity. My hairpin was useless. My access was limited to the family's biometrics, and trying to steal a print or retinal scan was a suicide mission. So I changed tactics. If I couldn't break their security, I would use their own system against them. I started filing meticulous, slightly pedantic medical reports. I noted Alara's improved platelet count, baby Leo's weight gain, even the humidity levels in the nursery, citing best practices for neonatal care. I was building a profile of the overly conscientious, harmless physician. Then I created a problem only I could solve. During a routine check, I expressed mild concern about a minor fluctuating arrhythmia in Alara's postpartum readings. It was likely stress, but I presented it as a potential need for a specialized Holter monitor we didn't have in-house. Lucas, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity to further bind me. Order it, use your credentials, expedite it. This was my chance. I placed the order through the legitimate medical supply portal, but I embedded a request in the notes field for the device's calibration logs from the manufacturer, a standard ask for a wary doctor. To retrieve those logs, the system would need to ping an external server and pull a file. And when that automated request went through the estate's firewall, it created a tiny, authorized data stream to the outside world. I couldn't access the internet, but the system could. And I knew from the inventory list that the system's clock was synchronized to a network time protocol server. Using a complex series of repeated calibration requests, I encoded a message in the timing of the pings, a primitive digital Morse code. I had no idea if it would work or who would even notice. I was signaling into the void, hoping the pattern would be flagged by someone somewhere as anomalous network traffic from a secure location. The monitor arrived. My calibration logs came through as a bland PDF. I said nothing. But 2 nights later, as I was reviewing baby Leo's chart, my secure tablet flickered. For 3 seconds, the screen dissolved into static, then displayed a string of numbers. 46.7326 minus 117.0006 coordinates. Then it went back to the chart. My heart hammered. Someone had seen my signal. Someone had hacked their way into the most secure system I'd ever seen just to send a location. It was a reply, and it was a trap or a lifeline. The coordinates pointed to a remote Forest Service road 20 miles from the estate. I had no way to get there. I was never alone, never unmonitored. But then the system gave me a gift. Baby Leo developed a mild but legitimate case of jaundice. The treatment was simple, phototherapy. But Alara, her hormones and anxiety spiking, became convinced the standard blue lights weren't working. She insisted on a specific, more advanced model only available at a specialized pediatric supplier in the city. Lucas, for all his control, was putty when it came to Leo's health. He agreed to let me accompany Mr. Kaido to collect the unit personally, a supervised field trip. This was my only window. The supplier was a 30-minute drive. The coordinates were a 15-minute detour. I needed to create a diversion. As we drove, I quietly activated the emergency distress beacon on the borrowed phototherapy unit, a feature I'd read about in the manual. Within minutes, the unit started emitting a low, persistent alarm and flashing a fault code. Mr. Kaido glared at the backseat. "What is that?" "A battery fault. It's not critical, but the unit won't charge. They'll have to replace it at the supplier. It might take a few minutes to diagnose." I forced apology into my voice. He cursed under his breath, pulling over. He got out to call the estate, reporting the delay. As he spoke, his back turned. I did the only thing I could think of. I slipped my tablet from my bag, opened the medical log, and typed a rapid, descriptive note about Leo's condition. But within the note, I used the first letter of each sentence to spell out a message. Coordinates real. Need extraction. ANYASHARMA. Then I deleted the note. But on these systems, nothing was ever truly deleted. If someone was monitoring my data stream, they might catch the keystroke log. It was another desperate signal flare. We got the replacement unit and turned back toward the estate. Then Mr. Kaito's phone rang. He listened, his expression turning to stone. Understood. He hung up and changed direction, taking a turn off the main highway onto a smaller road. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "Change of plan, a security precaution. We're taking an alternate route." The road got narrower, more wooded. My coordinates were burning in my mind. We were getting closer to them. Then it happened. A deer, or something made to look like a deer, bolted across the road. Mr. Kaito swerved hard, overcorrected, and the heavy SUV slammed into a ditch, coming to a jarring stop against a pine tree. The airbags didn't deploy. The impact was hard but not crippling. Mr. Kaito was dazed, a cut on his forehead. He fumbled for his sidearm. I didn't wait. I kicked open my damaged door and ran into the trees. I heard him shout, then a gunshot that snapped branches above my head. I ran blindly, the coordinates a compass in my mind. I broke through a line of trees and skidded to a halt on the gravel of the Forest Service road. It was empty. My heart sank. Then from the shadows of the pines, a figure emerged. Not a soldier. A woman in hiking gear holding a sophisticated tablet. "Dr. Sharma, my name is Agent Reed, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been trying to get a wire into Vance's operation for 18 months. You just walked out of it." I was shaking, gasping for air. "You got my signal." "We've been monitoring all anomalous data traffic from that IP block since Dr. Ellison's death. Your Morse code was clumsy, but it got our attention. We need you to come with us. Now, they'll be here in minutes." This was it, my escape, my salvation. But as I took a step toward her, a terrifying final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Dr. Ellison's death, the warehouse fire, the neurotech. The FBI had been watching for 18 months. They knew about the pipeline, they knew about Ellison, but they hadn't stopped it. They were letting it run. They were watching, which meant I wasn't just a witness, I was bait. And if I left with them now, Lucas would know the FBI was on to him. He would scrub everything, disappear. And I would have traded one cage for another, with no leverage and a target on my back. I looked back toward the road where I could hear the distant roar of approaching vehicles. Not just one, several, Lucas's backup. I looked at Agent Reed. "What's Protocol Chimera?" I demanded. Her face tightened. "That's classified, we need to move." "Tell me, or I walk back right now and tell them I got lost in the woods. You'll lose your only asset inside." She hesitated, then spoke fast. "It's a next-generation, non-consensual neural mapping program. The tech you saw isn't for sale. It's for data harvesting. Vance's firm identifies high-value targets, CEOs, politicians, scientists, creates a medical pretext to get them isolated, and uses the equipment to map their neural patterns, extract subconscious information, trade secrets, even deep-seated fears. The sanitization protocol is the removal of anyone who discovers the true purpose. Ellison did. Now you have." The world tilted. It wasn't black market gear. It was corporate and state-level espionage on a monstrous scale. And I was the new medical authority who would be signing off on the procedures. My credentials would be the cover for 1,000 violations. The roar of engines was closer. I made my choice. I turned and started running back toward the crash site, back toward the estate. Agent Reed shouted after me, "Sharma, you'll die in there." I didn't stop, because she was wrong. Walking out with the FBI was a death sentence. They'd put me in witness protection and Vance's reach would find me. But walking back in, with the knowledge of what Chimera was, and with the FBI now forced to act because their asset was in active danger, that was a weapon. I had to get back before Mr. Kaito could report my attempted flight. I had to spin a story of panic and confusion. I had to make myself more valuable to Lucas alive than dead. I had to become indispensable to the very monster I needed to destroy. The game was no longer about escape. It was about sabotage from within. and I had just become a variable they could no longer control. I stumbled back through the tree line, dirt on my face, my dress torn from branches. Mr. Kaido was on his feet, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 new SUVs and 4 more guards. He looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. I didn't give him a chance to speak. I unleashed the one thing they never expected from their quiet, broken doctor: hysterical, overwhelming panic. "They shot at me," I screamed, my voice raw and breaking. "The airbag didn't go off and the door flew open and I fell out and then there were gunshots. I thought it was you, I thought you were hit. I just ran, I didn't know where I was." I let myself sob, gasping for air, clutching my side as if in pain. I was not Anya the doctor. I was Anya the terrified victim, the civilian who'd been in a crash and heard gunfire. It was the only story that made my flight look like instinct, not defiance. Mr. Kaido's gaze was a scalpel. He didn't holster his weapon. "You ran into the woods, away from the road." I was disoriented. "The tree hit my side of the car," I cried, leaning against the damaged SUV for support. "I heard engines and I don't know what I thought. Please just take me back. I want to check on Leo. I need to check on Leo." Using the baby's name, showing concern for the family, was a calculated risk. It reframed my panic as protective instinct. One of the new guards, an older man with a calm demeanor, stepped forward. We swept the perimeter. No hostiles, no shell casings. He looked at the dent where the deer had hit, then at the tree we'd struck. "The crash pattern is consistent with an animal strike and driver error. Her story is plausible." Mr. Kaido finally lowered his gun, but his eyes promised a later reckoning. "Get in the car. The second vehicle, now." The ride back was a silent trial. I kept up the act, shaking, staring blankly out the window. Inside, my mind was a war room. The FBI knew I was back inside. They would be forced to accelerate their plans. I had to move faster. I was taken directly to Lucas's study. He stood by the fireplace, his back to me. Alara was there too, her face pale with worry. "Anya, are you hurt?" she asked immediately, starting toward me. Lucas held up a hand, stopping her. He turned. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were the coldest I'd ever seen them. "Explain." I gave him the same performance, embellished with medical details, possible minor concussion, adrenal shock. I focused on my fear for Leo, my regret for causing a delay in his treatment. I played to his paternal side and to his ego, the great Lucas Vance, whose doctor was so dedicated to his son that she ran in terror at the sound of a threat. When I finished, he was silent for a full minute. Then he said, "Kaido believes you attempted to flee." I met his gaze, letting a flicker of defiance through. "Mr. Kaido's job is to suspect everyone. My job is to keep your wife and son healthy. I failed today by leaving the vehicle. I let fear override my duty. It won't happen again." It was a confession wrapped in a promise of improved loyalty. Lucas studied me. Then, to my shock, he nodded. "Fear is a rational response to violence. Your priority was the family. That is what matters." He had chosen to believe the version that served his narrative. I was the loyal, if flawed, asset. The variable was being recalibrated, not eliminated. But the cost of my return was immediate. My access was restricted further. A guard was posted outside my suite at all times. My tablet's functions were reduced to only the most basic medical charts. I was under house arrest within the house. Yet I was still the physician. And that gave me one remaining point of control: the medical suite itself. Protocol Chimera, according to Agent Reed, required a specific cocktail of drugs to lower a subject's neural resistance, a mix of sedatives and neuroreceptive agents. As the doctor, I was responsible for signing off on the pharmacy orders. The next shipment was due in 48 hours. It was my only window. The night before the shipment arrived, I did my rounds. Alara was rocking Leo, looking exhausted. "He's so fragile, Anya," she whispered. "This world, it's not made for fragile things." "We protect them as best we can," I said, and for a moment, it wasn't an act. I saw the good woman trapped in the gilded cage, a hostage to her husband's ambition. What would happen to her and Leo when this all fell apart? The next morning, the pharmacy delivery arrived. I was escorted to the medical suite to verify and sign. The boxes contained vials of propofol, midazolam, and a third drug labeled cerebral interface stabilizer, Protocol C. This was the key. The stabilizer was the proprietary component that allowed the neural mapping. Under the watchful eyes of Mr. Kaito and a security camera, I began my inventory. I pretended to fumble with a box, spilling a tray of sterile syringes. As I knelt to pick them up, blocking the camera's view of my hands for 3 seconds, I did 2 things. First, I used a tiny magnet I'd salvaged from a broken speaker to corrupt the magnetic strip on the case containing the stabilizer vials, a corruption that would cause sporadic, undetectable dosage errors in the equipment. Second, I palmed a single vial of the midazolam. The sabotage was set. The vial was my insurance. That night, I used my medical knowledge to create a diversion. I injected the stolen midazolam into my own IV line, a carefully calculated, non-lethal dose that would mimic the symptoms of a sudden, severe cardiac arrhythmia. My biometric monitors, which fed directly to the security hub, went wild. Alarms blared throughout the wing. Guards burst into my room. I was convulsing on the floor, my heartbeat erratic on the monitor. It was a performance, but the drug made it terrifyingly real. In the chaos, as I was rushed to the medical suite on a gurney, I glimpsed the system. Every camera was fixed on the medical emergency. Every guard was mobilized. The West Wing's door was left with a single, distracted sentry. I was the perfect distraction. And while Lucas's security apparatus was focused on saving the life of their compromised doctor, the FBI moved. Agent Reed's team, having tracked the shipment and monitoring the estate's external signals, saw the internal chaos as their green light. The takedown was not with sirens and battering rams. It was silent. Black-clad agents scaled the walls, disabled perimeter sensors, and infiltrated the West Wing. They secured the Chimera lab, the servers, the evidence. They didn't come for me until it was over. I came to in the medical suite, an actual IV in my arm, Lucas Vance standing over me, his face a mask of fury. "What did you do?" he hissed. Before I could answer, the doors blew open. Agent Reed and a swarm of FBI tactical agents flooded the room. "Lucas Vance, you are under arrest for wire fraud, illegal trafficking of medical technology, and violations of the Cybersecurity and Data Theft Act. Everything is already in our custody." Lucas didn't fight. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the cold calculation shift to something else, a grudging respect. "The variable that became a virus," he said quietly as they cuffed him. "I misread your pathology, doctor. It wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon." Alara and Leo were taken into protective custody. The estate became a crime scene. I spent 3 days debriefing with the FBI, handing over the corrupted vial, explaining the magnet trick, providing every detail I'd absorbed. My contract was voided. The debt was erased, not by repayment, but by annihilation of the creditor. But the final surprising detail came from Agent Reed a week later, after the headlines had faded. "We've been through the Chimera data. Vance wasn't just selling the information. He was building a library, neural maps of hundreds of powerful people, a blackmail archive of unimaginable scale. But there's one map that doesn't fit. It's dated from 6 months ago. The subject was his wife, Alara." My blood ran cold. He mapped his own wife. "Not just mapped," Reed said, her voice grim. "The scan was done while she was in a coma early in her pregnancy after a fall down the stairs at their previous home. The data shows he was looking for something specific, a pattern of resistance. Alara Vance was his first test subject for a new form of control. He was trying to see if he could identify and suppress the part of the brain that generates dissent. He was preparing to perfect a way to make people loyal." The room spun. His wife's high-risk pregnancy wasn't just a cover. It was a continuation of the experiment. My act of kindness in that waiting room hadn't just saved a life. It had inserted a flaw into his perfect, monstrous plan. I had become the uncalculated variable that infected his entire system. The three black SUVs that came to my door weren't just collecting a debt. They were retrieving a tool, and that tool, in the end, broke the hand that tried to wield it. I walked away with a settlement from the government, my name cleared, my medical license reinstated. But I didn't go back to the hospital. I couldn't. I bought a small clinic in a town nobody knows where I treat ordinary people with ordinary problems. The quiet life I once craved. But sometimes, at night, I check the locks twice, and I watch the street. Because once, a simple act of kindness rewired my entire life. And you never know when the universe might decide to call in another debt. So what is the true price of a moment's compassion? We tell ourselves that kindness is its own reward, a noble act with no expectation. But the universe keeps a ledger we can't see. In my case, the cost was my old life, my safety, my trust in the world as a predictable place. The reward was uncovering a horror and perhaps saving others from it. But that balance sheet only makes sense in hindsight. In the quiet of my clinic now, I often think about the neural maps Lucas Vance coveted. He wanted to chart the human mind to control it, to find the secret pathways to loyalty and fear. He failed because he couldn't map for chaos. He couldn't anticipate a random connection in a waiting room. He couldn't quantify the stubborn spark in a person who's lost everything and decides, against all logic, to help anyway. That spark doesn't show up on a scan. It's the ultimate variable. The research tells us that helping strangers triggers a helper's high, a rush of dopamine. It feels good to be good. But they never mention the crash that can follow, the profound disorientation when that good deed pulls you into a story you never auditioned for. We celebrate the stories where kindness leads to a surprise inheritance or a celebrity's gratitude. We rarely talk about the ones where it leads you into a labyrinth of danger, where you have to become someone sharper, harder, just to find your way back out. Alara and Leo are safe under new names, in a place Lucas will never find. Agent Reed checks in sometimes. The case is ongoing, a sprawling web of white-collar crime and dark technology. My role in it is over. I am a footnote in a federal docket. But the question that story leaves me with isn't about them. It's about the next person in the next waiting room on the next crowded street. Would I do it again? Knowing everything that followed, I've asked myself that 1,000 times. The answer is always the same, and it terrifies me. Yes. Because the alternative is a world where we see someone fall and we look away, where we calculate the risk before offering a hand. Lucas Vance's world was built on that kind of calculation. It was an efficient, sterile, and monstrous place. So I keep my clinic. I treat fevers and sprains and worries. And I try to live with the paradox that to believe in the goodness of people, you have to accept that some people are not good. That to be willing to help, you must be prepared for the consequences. That trust is both our greatest vulnerability and our only real defense. The three black SUVs taught me that no act exists in a vacuum. Every choice sends a ripple. Some ripples are gentle, some become tidal waves. You can't know which you're making when you reach out your hand. You can only decide what kind of person you want to be in that moment, the one who helps, or the one who walks by. I know which one I am, even if I sometimes check the locks twice. If you found this journey from a single act of kindness into the heart of a hidden world compelling, there are countless other stories where ordinary lives collide with extraordinary consequences. Consider subscribing. We delve into the human moments that change everything. Thanks for listening.